A third of that was for low TRL activities, so research projects on the MEAs, balance of plants, stacks, but as well material for the hydrogen storage, for example, compression technologies for the HRSs, and 2/3 of the 440 million of funding went for demonstration activities. So to put cars, to put buses on the road, to study ships, to study aircraft, for example, trains, and heavy machinery. This session is precisely about this demo project, this pilot project. So next to me are several gentlemen who will talk about different projects. One project about car, a second one about trucks, a second one, about buses, third one about trucks, and then we'll finish not the session but the sequence of presentation by a study on hydrogen for port. Each of the gentlemen will do a presentation between 10-15 minutes, at the end of which you can ask questions. I encourage you, online or on site, to use Slido. There is a code, or there was a code for Slido, which is EU Hydrogen Week, EURD, standing for Research Days. Thank you for putting the slide back. At the end of the sequence of presentation, there will be a debate. For that debate, next to me is Professor Dirk de KEUKELEERE, who would co-moderate this debate. It's participative debate, so we'll give you the floor. If you would like to ask questions for the audience, please do so. The goal of the debate is very simple, is to look at the strategic research and innovation agenda of the Clean Hydrogen JU and see if there are gaps. Are we collecting everything in terms of transport, demo project, in the field of hydrogen? Thank you. Enough for an introduction. Let's go straight into the first presentation. It's a combination of two projects, ZEFER and H2ME2, that will be introduced to you by Mr. Romain Picard from Element Energy. Romain, the floor is yours. And I give you, apologies, the clicker, press on the big green button and it will push the slides.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lionel. Good morning, everyone. For those who join us in person and online as well. Thanks for the introduction and for the whole Clean Hydrogen GU for making it possible to have this event in person this year. So as say, my name is Romain Picard. I'm from Element Energy, an ERM group company. And today I will present so both hydrogen mobility for light vehicles project H2ME and ZEFER on the behalf of both consortia and as the coordinator of both projects. So if we start looking at the agenda, so I will start introducing both projects, seeing the figures, what the objective of both projects. Then I will focus on the business case in the case study in Paris, where the deployment of this FCEV demonstrates the case. And then we'll interest to the models of vehicles, the vehicles models, to see that they are also getting more available and more affordable in the market. And lastly, I will give the floor to you, the audience, for 5 minutes of questions. So yeah, to start, H2ME and ZEFER, in few words. So over the years and successively, the Clean Hydrogen GU funded a number of hydrogen projects to move the hydrogen vehicles from the demonstrator stage to pre-commercialization levels. So we can quote in the past the High Five project or Swarm project in the 1910 years. And now, so the H2ME and ZEFER are the latest in this family of projects, so for light-duty vehicles. And they aim respectively to increase the number of stations and the number of vehicles in Europe, but also to test the different mobility strategy and to check which end application is more relevant for the light-duty segment. So in few words, H2ME is the flagship project of the Clean Hydrogen GU, so the biggest project for the light-duty vehicles. It started back in 2015. It will end in 2023, so next year. The budget is 170 millions with a 67 million of funding. The deployment is in more than 9 countries in Europe, and it aims to deploy more than 45 HRS around these 9 countries, and to deploy more than 1,400 FCV. In terms of FCV, we have all the models that are available today in the project. So the Mirai 1, we have also the second generation of Mirai, Hyundai iX35, the Nexo, the Honda Clarity, the different Mercedes Daimler, and also the Renault and the Stellantis that will come, expected to come later in the year. To date, 40 HRS have been built. We are at the end of the project, so we are reaching the objectives. And more than 900 vehicles have been delivered. For the ZEFER project, this is a smaller project focusing on captive fleets. So it's also supposed to finish next year. It's a 17.5 million project budget with 5 million of funding. The deployment focus on big cities, capital cities. So we have Paris, London, and Copenhagen. And beside the deployment of vehicles, so 60 in each capital, we also have funding for upgrading the HRS to make them, to allow them to meet the demands of this fleet. So as said, those fundings aim to move this hydrogen mobility to a pre-commercial stage, and thanks to that project, we have been able to prove the real-world experimentation. We have been able to collect a large data set for Europe, thanks to our analysis partner, Cenex. We have also been able, of course, to have field trials and to assess the performance of the vehicles and the refueling solution. It's also allowed us to better understand the marketing strategy and to create robust assumption for future business case. Thanks to also the deployment of this project and the funding, we have seen a market stimulation and price reduction overall. So that's a good sign, positive sign for the future case of the light duty segments. And last but not least, it has allowed foundation for larger scale deployment, and we can see all over Europe, and especially in cities, that we have massive ambitions for the future, illustrated by the 1,000 terrorist plan for France by the H2 strategy, but there's also the 10,000 taxis that will be deployed in Paris by the Olympic Games, or different other projects such as the Valley project or IPC-EI. If we move into detail for the H2ME project, so as said, this is a real flagship project for the clean energy and for the whole Europe. In terms of deployment, because we can see that around 1/3 of the existing public HRS have been funded by H2ME initiative, and also the FCV in operation today in Europe, approximately 1/3 are funded by H2ME, which is important. I have a dynamic map that I don't know how I can.
From the IT in the back, so there is a map.
Is it possible to just get back on the previous slide? Sorry.
Can you, from the background IT, can you go back one slide? And there is a map.
The red button. Okay.
There is a map.
Is it possible to play the dynamic map? If you pass through the map, there is a play button, I think.
Thank you.
Click on play. Yeah, perfect. Try and view last time. If you click on the play button, it should work. Okay, maybe. It should work on PowerPoint mode, but maybe.
Well,
okay,
quite difficult.
That's fine. That's fine.
A map, but
we can imagine. So in this map, it shows where the vehicles are driving, and where also and the quantity of hydrogen dispensed in every cities of the project. So most importantly, the H2ME project allowed the green map to show that green mass mobility and logistic solutions have been proven in cities. So in the technical point of view, with similar ranges, refueling time and technology reliability to conventional vehicles. So we think that vehicles really meet the need of the customer. We can give quick figures. So the average vehicles in average in the project, they drove between 19 to 130 kilometers per day. Sorry. The consumption is also quite good, with around 100 kilometers for 1 kilogram of hydrogen refuel, and the availability is very good with of the vehicles, with more than 99% of availability. And the stations, the most utility station also in the project, dispense more than 75 tons hydrogen since the Q3 2027. The station are also able to deliver fast fill back-to-back, around 6 back-to-back refueling, which is also a good point. From the beginning and up to June 2022, this is more than 25 million of kilometers driven by the H2ME vehicles and more than 377 tons of hydrogen refueled. And sorry for not putting the dynamic map, but I can send the presentation after if you're interested. Now focusing quickly on ZEFER. So ZEFER focus on the captive fleet. So the captive fleets, they are professional vehicles whose intensive movement within a specific geographical area make the switch to BEV difficult. So this is why there is a very particular relevant for hydrogen vehicles. And they have initiated the deployment in three European capitals. So London, Copenhagen, and Paris, as you can see on the map. 60 vehicles in each city. And the deployment of fleets, this fleet make it also possible. An important point is to see that the deployment of these fleets make it possible for the HRS to have a sufficient demand and for them to find an economic equilibrium for the charging station. So it's logical that the stations used by this fleet are among the most used in Europe. So we can illustrate this by the HySetCo station in Paris. So there's 3 HySetCo stations in Paris, and recently they reached the number of 10 tons of hydrogen refueled by month in the recent quarter, which is a very significant number and encouraging. So yeah, as you can see in captive fleet, this model works quite well. And on the bottom chart, you can see that the evolution of the hydrogen refueled in comparison with the number of vehicles deployed in the project. So now that's lead me to the second section of this presentation. So we'll focus on the Paris deployment, which really demonstrates the case for FCV. So we just talked about the increase of refueling in Paris. So yeah, this is due mainly to the fleet deployment, but also to the HRS reliability, which is important, and also important point, their presence of the HRS in strategic location. So I had also a dynamic map on the bottom, but you can also, I will try to describe it a bit. So this is a heat map where you see where the vehicles are moving around Paris, and the 3 circles are the stations, but at the start of the project. So now there is a bit 2 more stations. And as you can see, they are really located in close from the city center, which is important. And the ones that are a bit further, they are located in the airports. So this is also very strategic location. And this is also one of the key of the success of the case in Paris. This is if we look at the refueling solution on the refueling solution side, and if we look at the vehicle side, we can see, as we say, that the vehicles are performant. And the hype fleet that is driving in Paris, they can comfortably fulfill a 300-kilometer journey in Paris without refueling, while it's very challenging for a BEV to do so. So in one word, we can say that the ZEFER and H2ME project have paved the way for further deployment. And in France, it is illustrated by the huge ambition of HYPE and HySetCo in Paris. We can see on the map on the right, below that this is a map for the ecosystem in 2025, so just after the Olympic Games in Paris. And the plan is to have more than 35 HRS in Paris at that time, and more than 10,000 taxis that will be around Paris. So that's huge ambition, but this have been made possible by both project. So yeah, and also there's also actor on the hydrogen production and distribution part with the French actor Elogen, McPhee and Symbio. And recently we heard that they have a massive ambition for a giga stack factory, so to produce stack in an industrial way. So, and all of these partners are part of H2ME or ZEFER. So this is for the case in Paris and also more broadly in France. And now last section that I wanted to talk, we focus a lot on hydrogen solutions for distribution. And now we can also see the recent news in terms of the vehicles. So yeah, one of the main barriers for the light segment is that we don't have enough models, as everyone knows. But we have seen recently that some positive signs. This is illustrated by the manufacturers that are offering even more efficient vehicles and also more affordable vehicles. In the tables, I put the Mirai. I put like a comparison for the Mirai Generation N and Mirai Generation 2. The Mirai Generation 2 is 15% less expensive than the Mirai 1, which is a positive sign, but have also a superior performance with a bigger tank, then bigger autonomy, and the Mirai 2 can then make more kilometers per day. We have seen it in the project. In ZEFER, we have Mirai 1 and Mirai 2, and we have been able to compare them, and we've seen that in reality, the Mirai 2 travels 20% more kilometers per day than the one. So this is something that we will need to confirm with time. But this is what we've seen in Copenhagen, where both generations of Mirai were deployed. Also, one of the improvements is that the Mirai 2 has a 5 seats capacity, which is important for taxi driver, because they can accept all the trips, and sometimes they had to refuel some trips. They have only 4 seats. And you will see, and you might know that the BMW iX5 will be out until by the end of the year. That will be for limited series first, and after that will be open to the public. But we can expect already some great performance of these vehicles. First, they will have 2 tanks, so it will have a very, very good range. And you can see also the horsepower are much higher than the Mirai 1. So possibly other opportunities for the light-duty segment thanks to these vehicles. And that's all for me. And yeah, I'm happy to take any question if you have. Thank you for listening to the presentation.
Thank you, Romain. Any question from the audience? If that is the case, raise your hand and the microphone will be given to you. There are questions. There is one question so far on Slido, and I do have other questions. On Slido, regarding the comparison with the battery electric vehicle, was there an analysis conducted to check the impact, end-to-end impact, regarding the fuel, the energy production, and the refueling? So I guess the question is it's a benchmark on the efficiency between battery and hydrogen vehicle.
Yes, so if we did a life cycle analysis, maybe?
As well, yes.
Yeah, there has been some study regarding the life cycle analysis, and the conclusion that it was quite equivalent from the creation of the manufacturing of the cars until the end life of the cars between BEV and FCV. So yeah, we have that in some reports as part of H2ME. I will be pleased to share. So yeah, that was the point. That's very, very comparable. In terms of the production, this is something we will need also to check further, I think. Yeah, in terms of for the fuel consumption, something I think has been taken in this analysis, but we will be able to make further analysis by the end of the project.
Thank you. Regarding the taxi deployments, what are the conditions in a city, in a location, to deploy taxi there? What are the factors needed to make it a success?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's what we are trying to see from the ZEFER experience mainly. So yeah, the main key is to have directly, if I can say, an ecosystem. So to have in the same time to deploy the refueling, the distribution solutions, and also to have the usage. As I show in the slides, it is easier after for the HRS to find an economic equilibrium and to make them profitable if they have directly from the start of the operation a demand that is a usual demand that will drive around the HRS. So yeah, say the first thing is to create an ecosystem and to deploy in the same time the refueling options and the vehicles. Then, as we've seen, we also need to have this refueling options in some strategic location. It was the case in Paris, but was not necessarily the case in other cities where the refueling options were a bit further from the city center. So that's also an important point. And last but not least, but yeah, at this stage we still not also funding from the policymakers. So that's I would say at this stage it's important for successful taxi deployment.
So the fleet deployment is interesting because you have both the infrastructure and the vehicle. Within H2ME2, are there other types of fleets, not simply taxis, that have been deployed?
Yeah. So yeah, the main it's true that the main fleet that we have in this project are taxi. But there are also some other professional fleets as part of a private company, but also a public company that starting to see different options because of course they need to replace their fleet, their conventional vehicles fleet to do to zero emission solutions, and they consider the FCV as an option, especially for those who do a lot of mileage, of course, because as we've seen, and as you might know, the FCV makes sense for the vehicles who do a lot of mileage. And so yeah, to answer to your question, Lionel, yes, we have in the project some fleets from a public or private company that have FCV. I can see a question from maybe very...
yes, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. In fact, in this H2ME initiative, you have a light delivery vehicle. And for light delivery vehicle, what is important, and it will answer part of the question being asked on the comparison between battery and fuel cell electric vehicle, mainly 25% of the usages of a light delivery vehicle only can be covered by battery. It's not every day, but usually when you have a light delivery vehicle, it's not only about autonomy, it's about availability of a vehicle and the capability you have to recharge your vehicle, if it's a battery one. And the drivers do not necessarily park their vehicle at the depot. They live maybe in buildings where you do not have possibility to recharge your vehicle, and then cannot start their day with an empty battery or a half-full battery. So that's why companies like Stellantis, for example, and EVIA, which is a joint venture between Renault and Plug Power, are turning massively towards either hybridization, combining battery and fuel cell, in order to provide the same services to the professional users, the one they have with ICE. And so H2ME was a good example of the service that fuel cell electric vehicle can bring to light delivery vehicle, especially in France, for example, when we will have to implement in 2024 43 zero emission cities. So
Thank you very much for the complimentary information. I suggest we move now to the next speaker and the next topic, which will be about hydrogen fuel cell buses, Project 3 Motion, introduced to you by Mr. Stefan Neis from WaterstofNet. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lionel. Thank you for all the people being here, and thank you also for us to present the 3 Motion project here. It's a long-lasting project. Let's see if it's working. Yes. So the call text was written in 2013, and we started in 2014. We're closing the project, which was a demonstration project, at the end of this year. It's a FP7 project still, after 8 years. We're now at about 95% of what we wanted to reach, we reached. The total budget was approximately 38 million, which approximately 15 million was funded by the joint undertaking to do this. You see the partners here. There are partners from all over Europe. The project had also a lot of changes in the progress. So we had initial cities, also including Belgium and Italy. And these sites were at least cancelled by several reasons, and then new sites came in. So at this moment in time, we have buses running in Denmark, the UK, the Netherlands, and France. The project itself was a bridging project between early bus deployment and even fuel cell prototyping, bridging the gap then between these projects and then the large-scale demonstration that comes after 3 Motion. You see here a nice map of all the sites that are involved. London with 10 buses, Aalborg with 3 buses, Versailles with 7 buses in 2 locations that are operating, Po, which is also in the Jive project, and the Rotterdam site, which covers province of South Holland and Rotterdam city itself. We deployed in total 28 buses, 21 new buses, and 8 existing buses from the Chic project. These buses retired because they had an end of life. There was also a premiere in the project where buses, fuel cell buses, reach their end of life, showing the capability of their long-lasting and also maintaining these buses for a long time. Here you see the comparison with the previous project. So in time from 2010 until now, just like Lionel said, there were a lot of projects going on in mobility, also for the joint undertaking with the Chic project, high velocity, high transit in Aberdeen, 3 Motion, and then going to Jive 1, Jive 2 for the larger scale demonstrations. And you see the 3 Motion project lasting the longest of them all, deploying these buses over that time. What was also a premiere is that we had 4 bus OEMs in the project, Van Hool, VDL, ZEFER and Wrightbus. We've got 4 to 5 bus types, 12-meter buses, 13-meter buses, but also articulated buses in Po. And we have 2 fuel cell suppliers in these buses. There was also a premiere in this project. As we're talking about the achievements, there are some KPIs that the joint undertaking has written down into the goals, which we answered with our text. And I wanted to show you the results we are already having at this moment in time with the KPIs. So we had 29 buses in 5 sites. I'll describe these as 5 cities, 7 sites with 8 operators. We have an average availability, including the Corona years, between 60 and 90% availability of the buses. We've shown that some of the buses drove for more than 15,000 kilometers with a fuel cell. So also the warranty was checked with this. The buses decreased in prices, where we started with buses of more than 1.2 million in previous projects. These buses already went down to 850,000 for at least a 12-meter bus. And the articulated buses for the first time also at 1.2 million approximately. If you talk about fuel consumption, we're on the marker of 8 to 10 kilograms per 100 kilometer in average. And we all use 350 bar in these buses. I think these pictures tell the most. You see at least mileage on the buses, just like in H2ME, we see a lot of mileage on buses. But you also see differences. I'll explain them shortly. You also see that there are only 2 buses of London in the first picture, but the 8 buses that were retired are also in the right pictures, where you see that in January 2018, London received their 2 new buses and drove a fleet of 10 buses between January 2018 and approximately June 2020, before they retired. And you see, for example, Rotterdam, RET is driving a lot of kilometers with these buses in comparison to the rest. It doesn't say that the rest is not driving much with the buses, but the routes that are driving are smaller, so they got less kilometers driven per day. Therefore, also these stick figures are a little bit shorter. Versailles, for example, has a high availability of 94%, but they only drive short routes. They can't manage to do more, therefore not meeting the 40,000 kilometers a year ambition. If we're talking about performance, in total approximately now 2.5 million kilometers have been driven by all the buses combined in this project. And you also see in the same slide the hydrogen consumed per bus at every location. And it shows the same picture. It's also logical that the buses that drive kilometers also consume hydrogen at the same pace, between 8 and 10 kilograms per 100 kilometers. What are the risks, challenges and lessons learned in the project? So we're doing this project already 8 years with 8 operators. So there are a lot of lessons learned, and we had to depict them in some small bullet points. And we also have different bus concepts. So we've got range extender bus concepts, we got articulated buses, 12-meter buses and 13-meter buses. Not all concepts are equal in performance, that's what we saw, and also will not be scalable, as some of the concepts are not the way to go for the future. One of the examples is the VDL bus with a range extender carriage behind the bus. It's not scalable. We see that it performs well, but an integration in the bus is preferred by bus suppliers. What we also see at ZEFER, for example, where they integrated the bus trailer in underneath the bus, is also working quite good. But B Green and ZEFER is in the phase that they're not in the same level of Van Hol, which has now 12 years experience with these buses, but only 4 years, so they walk into some of the constraints that Van Hol had to solve within these 12 years of operation. Data monitoring is still an exercise on itself. It's not easy to connect all the data points together from fueling stations, buses and sites, but also the logbooks from the operators, because we also work with logbooks to see what the operators are looking into in the daily operation, what the problems are and how to solve them. HRS availability can still improve. We're at a high availability, but the operators are really in need of fueling stations that work all the time to do big and large scale deployment of these buses. And overall there's a big competition of battery electric buses. So fuel cell buses are not the only solution, not the only zero emission solution. And what we see is that at large scale deployment, hydrogen buses could profit a little bit more from this. We see a lot of in-city battery electric buses, but also in-city problems with the main infrastructure with these deployments. So hydrogen has a chance when operating outside cities, regional or interregional, but also within cities if there are limitations with the infrastructure. So it's a viable option, and within the project we reached an end of life of buses. It was also premiere, and we see that the buses are performing well. What we also do are communication activities. So it's not only performing with buses, but also informing people, informing the European public, the European Parliament, other projects. We're also cooperating with the other projects. And you see here a picture of President Macron that opened the 8 buses in Po. We have some videos of all the sites performing their day-to-day operation with the buses, having driver interviews or even passenger interviews. And we also share the information on the large conferences and other exhibitions, just like this one, to share this. What we also did in the last year, because there's a lot of attention for fuel cell buses in Central Europe, but we also saw some black spots in Europe itself. Southern countries, but also Eastern countries, where we're informing them and exploring also with them the probability of using hydrogen buses, for example, in Spain and Portugal. And we do knowledge exchange, not only within the joint undertaking, but also outside the program, like the LIFE program, which is also a European program. We exchange knowledge with these programs. Thank you. That was it from my side.
Thank you very much, Stefan. We have 2 questions on Slido. The first one is why was the Cologne bus fleet not joining the project?
Yes, the Cologne bus fleet itself was a separate project where there were, and then we have to go back a long time, there were 2 APTS buses driving already. They wanted to extend this, not with the APTS buses. Extending with 2 buses, and it was in the time of, I think, high velocity and in between high velocity and tree motion. So they weren't involved in the tree motion project, but they were using the same buses as a tree motion and also within the same timeline. And what we saw, for example, in Cologne, is that they also operated well. They had slightly higher consumption, and the reason for that was the operation, which followed from the logbooks, is that the drivers in Cologne, for example, in the wintertime, switched the buses on half an hour before, heating up the bus before the passengers could step in. And this also consumed energy for creating heat. We saw at least some differences within the buses.
And perhaps a continuity question would be, from the cities involved in tree motion or in earlier projects, at the end of the demo phase, what is their feeling towards the technology? Do they increase the fleets of the hydrogen buses? Do they turn to other technology?
Yes, so it depends a little bit on the partners. So we see that province of South Holland is scaling up. They are also in the Jive project, they're scaling up from 4 buses to 20 buses. We see there's a pull from 3 in tree motion to the 8 that are driving in total to a bigger fleet in Jive. But we also see, for example, Aalborg City, which bought the buses, which gave them as a region and a city to the operator. They are not extending in increasing fleet, because they are not the operator. The operator itself has to do it. They tendered the buses and they saw more potential in battery electric buses. So not all sites are scaling up, but I think 60 to 75% of the sites are scaling up with fuel cell buses.
Thank you. Yes, question in the audience. There is a microphone. One mic will come for the lady in front.
Thank you. What about the maintenance, the problems with technical stuff, etc.?
Yes, so the technical stuff, yes, that's an issue, but that's an issue for all the technologies, also battery electric buses. What is done also in the project, we've looked into this. Workshop adaptations is one, so you need to adapt workshops for creating a hydrogen society, at least at the PTO. But you also need the mechanics, and from Van Hol, from all the bus suppliers, mechanics were trained. First they used their own mechanics on site, then train the trainer principle, training mechanics on site to maintain the buses, to at least be able to have the highest availability of the buses as possible. So there's a lot of training involved also.
Thank you. We have another question in the room.
It's not a question, rather a testimonial. I would like to mark how important such funded projects are for national countries, because in France, for example, at the French National Association, we used both free motion and Jive project in order to onboard cities, in order to educate the cities on what is a hydrogen bus, because usually they think that electric bus is only battery bus. And with a great success, because we're keeping track on how many bus the cities in France, fuel cell bus they want to have. And today we're reaching 858 intent to order fuel cell buses until 2025. So I think, thank you for having conducted these initiatives.
Yes. And that's also why we're having the final conference in France, which will take place on the 29th of November, also including these findings that France is also a front role player now in deployment of hydrogen buses after this project.
Thank you. One more question on Slido, technical one. Will the buses go for 700 bar system for the storage of the hydrogen?
The three motion buses don't, because they have their tasks already set out. But we see some of the manufacturers go to 700 bar, but also some of the manufacturers staying at 350 bar, because going further than 400 kilometers on a day is not workable for these buses. The drivers don't drive more than these 400 kilometers a day. So the operation doesn't need more than more range in this case.
And you have shown some graph of the same city, Versailles,
Yes.
two different operators,
Yes.
and two different usage of the buses.
Yes.
Why is that? Do you know?
Savac is using Van Hol buses. They are driving shorter routes. B Green is driving longer buses, longer bus routes with another supplier, Safra Bus, which is also a range extender model. And these buses are were the first primer buses of Safra that's being put into operation. And these sometimes suffer a little bit from child's diseases, but also from development. So they have now also changed to new fuel cells that are more efficient. And you see a little bit more of unavailability due to that, but there's also a lot of learnings being done there, and also developments. So these buses are a little bit more in the development phase in deployment than the full deployment that Van Hol does.
Thank you very much. We move to another subject now, garbage trucks, or trucks, hydrogen fuel cell trucks, with the project Revive, presented by Mr. Sven Goethals from Tractebel NG here in Belgium. Sven, the floor is yours.
So first of all, thank you for letting us present this Revive project. Our project manager himself was not available. We have to excuse him. So I will try to present you the project. I'm Business Development Director Energy in Tractebel, and I got some briefing up front. So let's start with a small project overview. The project there was a call for the project in 2017. We started the project 5 years ago, started in 2018, and should have ended initially beginning of this year. However, we had some delays in the final truck construction, and so as we want to have a 2 years operational feedback, we agreed to prolong the project up to mid-2024. Total project budget is 8.7 million, and the contribution of FCH joint undertaken is 4.9. The consortium is a consortium of truck end users who will demonstrate, whose task is to demonstrate and get feedback, technology integrators, and then also experts supporting the project. But we'll come back on it in the following slides. So the overall objective of Revive is to accelerate the deployment of hydrogen-fueled refuse trucks in Europe. It's a further niche going from cars over buses, and what we want to do is to advance the technology readiness level of this application, and to move into a closer large-scale deployment by developing high-performance fuel cell refuse trucks that can meet the high energy demands of the waste operators and the public authorities. And also we want to have a track record of 15 trucks in operation over this 2 years period, and want to prove that we can have a 90% availability that can compete with the availability we have today with diesel technologies. It's also important to mention that we want to implement a fuel cell system from European suppliers, as we want to create also, or at least contribute in creation of a competitive supply value chain in Europe. And then in parallel with the technical validation and demonstration works, the project aims also to create a customer demand for this kind of application, by showcasing that it's possible and that there is really a business model. It appears that the waste garbage community might be a little bit, let's say, not so open to modification, so there's also something that we want to do. And to achieve this, we will, let's say, we will also monitor data, and this is then done by CA. When we go to the project summary, so you can see that it's we have a number of partners over 6 European countries, including waste operators, equipment manufacturers, parts for data collection, dissemination and coordination. On the left side you can see who are the different operators spread over different countries, as well public as private waste garbage trucks operators. There is E-Trucks as manufacturer, supported by 2 European fuel cell suppliers, Proton Motor and Power Cells. And then the expertise, it's Tractebel is performing the coordination. CEA is supporting in data collection. WaterstofNet and the colleagues here are supporting for deployment of the truck. And then Element Energy is supporting in disseminating of the activities, and also give support for total cost of ownership calculations. Where we stand today, as said, it's a project there's some delay on the project. For the time being, we have 7 trucks that are constructed, 4 for the Netherlands, 1 for Denmark and 2 in Antwerp, and the other trucks should end their construction for end of this year, and we expect that we could start beginning 2023. What are the delays in construction? We have some delay in ordering. There are also supply chain issues linked to COVID, linked to also the current geopolitical situation. And there are also still some needs for technical development. So this all made that garbage trucks is a niche, and it appeared that for a niche, progress was less advanced than for fuel cell cars or for fuel cell buses. Nevertheless, we have already first feedback of operation. You can see that the first truck operational was beginning was May 2021 in Breda, July, and then this year we could have also first truck in Italy, and a second truck and in Breda, and then also a truck and a first truck in the Netherlands. And what you can see is that if you look to the data, we also see that let's say the deployment or the launching of the utilization of the trucks is not always so obvious, as there were also some periods during which there's no data available due to some technical problems. In total, today, we have from those 4 trucks almost 14,000 kilometers driven, 2 tons of hydrogen used, close to 200 refills. We see that the average refueling time is 17 minutes, quarter of an hour, and we see also that the fuel cell hours today we are approximately at 1,000 hours. What we also see is that the routes and the way that those trucks are used are quite different. It's perhaps something surprising, but refuse trucks, one refuse truck is not comparable to another refuse truck. There are a lot of ways of let's say loading of how refuse trucks loads. There's also a lot of types of waste that are used in refuse or loaded by refuse trucks, and this all has particular constraints, which makes then also that say that utilization is quite different, and is typical from one refuse truck. It's almost typical from one refuse truck to another. What are now the risk and the challenges and some first lessons learned? What we see is with refuse trucks, they have their own routing, and the refueling infrastructure should be close to their routing. and as seen in the other projects, availability of, let's say, availability or proximity of refueling installation is crucial, and to ensure this mobility. But we could see the refueling part was not part of the project, and this has been the number one cause of delay, because there were in some of the cities where we want to deploy lack of refueling infrastructure, which prevented then some of the partners to order trucks, and even unfortunately some of the partners had to leave the project because there was no refueling infrastructure available. So definitely something that's it's a little bit the chicken and the egg. What we also hear in other hydrogen projects, definitely let's say a big concern here. Another issue was we wanted to work with European fuel cell technology, and certainly in the beginning this technology was not available, or not available, meeting the technical requirements and the commercial expectations set forward both by e-trucks and by the cities. So in the end we were obliged to launch a market study to identify what is the overall state of the art of the European fuel cell markets, and we will look also for suppliers that were ready to introduce the system into the Revive project. It was a challenge in the beginning of the project. However, nowadays we see that the collaboration with the fuel cell suppliers is really good, and this is under control. The third point is the standardization of refuse trucks for an agnostic refuse, let's say, guys. We suppose refuse trucks are let's say quite standardized, but this is definitely not the case. And this also complexifies then let's say the realization of the project, because there are a lot of combinations possible. We've seen it in the buses. There are some combinations, probably with refuse trucks it's still a factor or two higher, and this makes that okay, it's the type of waste, the type of loading, all this makes that refuse trucks are quite particular, and also need then particular solutions. The next point is also the, let's say, the putting in the road. It's not only, let's say, building the refuse trucks, but it's also ensuring, let's say, their deployment, and then the regulation, and getting, let's say, the authorization of driving your refuse truck on the roads. We work with it's a system where you have a vehicle particular authorization, which means that for every refuse truck we need to have that we put on the road, we need to have a particular, let's say, validation, which for sure then, if you speak about validation by authorities, which for sure then again takes time and delays your projects. And then the last, okay, it's stakeholder management. But stakeholders are important, but we work with guys who collect waste, and this is also something that we need to take into consideration. In one city in Breda, I think we used an older refuse truck that we upgraded, and then we came, let's say, with a new truck. But definitely there was not the expectation by the, let's say, by the truck drivers, and also it involved then some issues. So truck drivers, the staff that does maintenance on the truck, we should really include them at an early stage of the project. What is the expected impact? What we really believe is that through Revive, we were capable of accelerating the commercialization of the fuel cells and hydrogen technologies. We're capable of integrating the fuel cell systems from two EU manufacturers. Secondly, the project will also accelerate the commercialization by raising the awareness of fuel cell technology among mainstream truck OEMs, and demonstrate the role of fuel cells in future zero emission roadmaps. A lot of cities go for zero emission. We will also be obliged with refuse trucks to comply with it. So this will definitely help. And we created a pathway. And then furthermore, we expect that demonstrating a route to high utilization of hydrogen refueling stations, and then the support of this hydrogen, and this will also then, let's say, help also to further, let's say, develop mobility for other type of hydrogen utilization. Finally, some information on communication and dissemination. We think it's something it's important. Just want to highlight that still this month we were present at 2 events, EMR H2 Booster event in Belgium and Wind Meet Gas in the Netherlands. Also on events, beginning of this year, the 2 refuse trucks in the Netherlands by ProZero were displayed at the seminar in Genk, Belgium. So again, showing it's something concrete, showing also to the community of that the refuse trucks on hydrogen are a solution. And then the last slide, for sure there are also some synergies with other projects and programs. We have you see here we have the Leuven Grab Hydrogen and Interreg Regio, where we had we had collaboration agreements to jointly organize events, share the lessons learned, and then also work on or make policy recommendations at the end of the project. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sven. Any question from the audience? Yes, the lady in front.
Thank you for this very interesting presentation. Could you say something more about the homologation? Could you say something more about the homologation? And are there certified laboratories that support this procedure?
What I understand from my colleague is that for the homologation and certification, this is when the trucks are ready in the factory. It still need to be approved by, let's say, by the local authorities in order to get the stamp to go on the road. And apparently this is something that's you need all the paperwork, and it's like every homologation, where it's while for cars you have standard homologations, and once this is available, you can apply it on let's say on the whole batch. Here for every truck it's really a unique homologation, which means that for every truck we always need to do the same effort, like for a whole batch or a whole series of production. And this is, at this stage, this is an issue. Probably once we go to more commercial operation, probably there we will have let's say also standard homologation available, so that we can then also go for let's say batch production. But definitely for the time being, this is not the case. So I don't know, Stefan, for the buses you had something comparable?
No, but also for the garbage trucks itself, because I'm managing the operation of these vehicles in the project. You see that, like Sven said, not every vehicle is the same. So you got a base platform that's the same. Your compactor is different. There's a side loader, back loader, top loader. You use 15 kilograms of hydrogen. You put it on top of the back loader. You put it after the cabin. You use a protomotor fuel cell. You use a power cell fuel cell. It's all different. And this makes it all homologation needs to be done on that separate vehicle. If you have an identical copy of a vehicle, you can use the same homologation, so you can copy paste, but not every operator has the same vehicle, and that's the issue. Just like the buses, you like other seats, other doors, etc. And this makes it difficult to scale up in identical copies. So there are not 12 identical copies. Those are, I think, 13 different versions of the vehicles out of the 15. Yes, or at least have operators using the same methods of collecting waste, using the same bins, using the same rear loader, for example, and then it's scaling up, and it makes it easier.
But is this something specific for hydrogen, or is this more related to just the segment that you have garbage trucks, where you always have this issue?
No, it's a segment, I think, but also the fact for hydrogen is that you have limited legislation on this. You have the EC 79 for the hydrogen parts, but you also do EMC testing, so there are a lot of tests to be done, because there's no one conform measure to take with these vehicles on the homologation. Sven, you have some?
Okay, so the issue is that you don't have this testing at a European level or something like that.
But when we will have, let's say, a higher application or more applications, for sure we will have also, we will be capable of falling back to the homologations already done. But now in this case, we noticed that finally there are, let's say, of the 15 trucks, it's our 15 unique trucks. We may suppose in the future that there will also be, and definitely also that when end users will come, that they will then select what's available in the portfolio of the different manufacturers. But proper to this sector, probably you will have, let's say, more variation than you will have in other sectors.
Thank you, gentlemen. You're already starting the debate, which is nice. So we take note of the homologation issue. Some questions in the room, indeed. Sorry, can you bring the microphone to the gentleman in front?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I have a question to both last presenters. We were talking about the trucks and potentially also refuse vehicles. What has happened on the 35 megapascal hydrogen filling station side? Because as far as I know, there is no proper protocol existing for refueling buses and also refuse trucks.
Shall I answer? So what we see is these vehicles don't use communication, so they are filling with a modest rate. You also saw that the average time was 17 minutes to fill a vehicle. If you do cooling with these vehicles, you can do up to between 8 and 10 minutes for filling. But we use still the old SAA protocol for non-communication and sometimes non-cooling, and that means that some of the sites have long fueling times. The sites of Antwerp are now testing, at least with the vehicles, the new formula from, what is it, the MC formula. So they're using the MC formula on these trucks to get faster fillings with cooling and testing this. And we see that these vehicles are fueling within 10 minutes now.
Thank you. One more question from Slido. What is the power demand used by the garbage trucks? Do you know? No? The power of the...
Also, these vehicles, they are hybrids, so they use a battery pack and they use a fuel cell, which is used as a range extender, bigger fuel cell being used now than previously. But you see that also depending on the fraction you use, is it collecting just plastics or is it green waste, which weighs a lot. You see that driving, you also see that not much is driving. There are routes between 100 but also 30 kilometers. And you see a lot of differences in the energy consumption, but on average you see that 50% goes to the compactor and 50% goes to the driving of the vehicle. Sometimes more goes to the compactor, sometimes more goes to the driving, depending on where you have to go to deplete your vehicle or to collect the vehicle, or at least the waste outside the cities. Yes.
Thank you. In fact, now the very last question. You indicated in some areas that there are no HRSCs for the garbage truck. So how do you refuel them? Are there some temporary stations? Or?
But that was just the issue of the, let's say, why some cities left or decided to leave the program, and then some other cities went in. So there was we had to do a matching between those cities where hydrogen fueling stations were available, and those, or at least in the region or in the vicinity, and then where it was not available. So a matchmaking between interested refuse trucks operators and availability of refueling stations had to be made.
Yeah, this was the case in Roosendaal, where ZEFER stepped out because there was no refueling station. We as WaterstofNet also operated a mobile refueling station, put it into operation, for example, in Breda, when the fueling station was delayed a lot. We put half a year a mobile refueling station there to operate the vehicle.
Clear. Thanks. Now, aside from projects, within the transport area of the Clean Hydrogen JU, we do have studies. One of the studies is looking at the hydrogen demand and the supply in port and industrial coastal area. The speaker is Mr. Stijn Vercammen from Deloitte. Stijn will explain to you this study. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lionel, and thanks to you all. Let's have a look into indeed this study, where transport is part of it, but it takes a more holistic look, a more macroeconomic look at hydrogen demand and supply for Europe. So a couple of slides to introduce you to the study. On one hand, our objective is to provide foresight and see how these dynamics will evolve or can be expected to evolve, and what is required to make it happen and to kickstart really the hydrogen economy, and to get those molecules, for example, to Europe and the various regions and locations. A second objective is community building. So not only informing people, but also bringing them together. We have an advisory board, and we also organize network events to bring boards in the broader value chain together around this topic. So what I will present briefly to you today is the first, let's say, two tasks mainly of our study, which is indeed around hydrogen demand and supply. However, we also look into business models, specifically from a port perspective, case studies, and recommendations on future activities to overcome technological and non-technological barriers. So maybe one step back. So why our focus on ports and industrial coastal areas? Because it's believed that they will form a bit of the seed or a starting point where a lot of hydrogen demand is expected, or at least to kick off the hydrogen economy. In terms of the framework of our study, so you have Europe as a whole, at least how it's shown here on the map. So the EU 27, UK and Norway. A lot of ports. I think we have 400 ports in total. However, we also look at the hinterland hydrogen demand, for example, in the sense that some of the ports are expected to act as an important energy hub and to transit the hydrogen from outside of Europe towards the hinterland and supply them with their hydrogen demand. So we look across some various categories. Transport, port activities, it's a bit of a particular one because we are focused here on ports, it's also included. Industrial activities, urban activity, and these are really the main categories. We look across the whole value chain and we look at different types of supply. So local production of hydrogen, mainly based on renewable energy, but also import of hydrogen from various countries around the world. But let's have a look at that just in a second now. So what comes out in terms of hydrogen demand? What we've shown here on the map are 12 clusters that we identify, and where we identify hydrogen demand across the various segments. So we see that the hydrogen demand is expected, as well known, to accelerate and pick up first in the industrial clusters and from industrial demand, but then also as of 2030 accelerate in the transport segments. So in terms of transport segments, we look at mainly heavy duty freight, but also international shipping, as well as cargo handling inside port areas. So whatever is related to transport is what you see in the yellowish brown color on the chart in the middle. What you see on top of the chart is whatever is expected in terms of hydrogen demand in port areas, and whatever is outside of port areas is at the bottom of the chart. So we expect in an ambitious scenario by 2050 about 52 megatons of hydrogen demand for Europe as a whole. And this is then a breakdown of the various demand categories. What is lacking in this slide at this moment, and that is the next step, I will come back on that at the end, is also the whole Repower EU initiative. By 2030, that would mean an acceleration of hydrogen demand. Basically, what we see now in, let's say, the moderate scenario in 2040, that would mean roughly the 20 million tons of Repower EU by 2030. So that policy initiative that has taken place, let's say, during the course of our study is currently being further developed. We'll also, let's say, inject it in the study because there's also some repercussions in terms of what it now means then of supplying that demand and the costs related to that. If we then take a look at hydrogen supply, so what we have is here our base scenario where we expect, or we see the split on one hand between whatever is, let's say, transparent, that is imported hydrogen, so in the middle, and also on the map. So green and blue hydrogen imported from outside of Europe, and then the dark green, which comes in fact on top of some existing SMR installations that will also partially be retrofitted for blue, is actually the local hydrogen production, local green hydrogen production. You see that there is quite some difference between the clusters. Some clusters are expected, for example, in Spain or Norway, UK for that matter, to be able to supply to a larger extent themselves with and be self-reliant. Whereas, for example, the cluster where you have Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, you see actually that, let's say, roughly 50% or so is expected to be supplied from outside of Europe, so a 50-50% split. But that's just our base scenario. And here, before going to our second supply scenario, it also shows what kind of levelized cost of hydrogen do we expect in Europe, and indeed what kind of cost can end users expect, or at least this is the cost that is required to bring the hydrogen, to produce it in Europe locally, or to bring it from outside of Europe. And the chart also indicates some of the regions from which the hydrogen could come from. So all of this is an economic optimization to fit the hydrogen supply and to bring it towards these clusters. So you see on the left-hand side a lot of wind-based hydrogen, and then a bit more to the right, offshore wind in the dark green, and then more the transparent colors, imported hydrogen. What is a small note to make here is that we look at different carriers, and imported hydrogen will come mainly in the form we expect of ammonia, at least in our model, although we did not look at a full range of carriers. But in that case, it's important to note that this import ammonia can also be used directly, and hence a conversion a cracking back to hydrogen locally is not per se always necessary. In these cost curves, that cracking is included. So you could expect that those imported molecules actually are more cost competitive as they are presented here. For example, for shipping, this is an important note to take. In our second scenario, we see actually that there can be quite a shift of whatever is imported versus the local production. This scenario, well, actually foresees a more stringent deployment rate of local renewables in Europe. After all, first of all, we assume that there will be used renewable electricity for direct electrification, of course, but whatever is left on that, we foresee a bit more stringent deployment rate because of discussions in the advisory board where they flagged it would be better to present it in this balanced fashion, and in fact this would mean that let's say the Repower EU for example, which strives for a 50-50% split between local production and import, is actually somewhere in between of these scenarios. And then this gives them a picture for this scenario where there's more imports, imports mainly from North Africa and the Middle East, and the specific regions are also mentioned here with a bit of a plateau at around 3.5 euro per kilograms. These costs, they also heavily depend on the evolutions of CAPEX and OPEX of the different technologies. However, we benchmark them with other studies, such as the European Hydrogen Backbone, but all of them they have slight variations. I think the most important is to see, how do they also compare in a relative manner. And then to conclude on this supply scenarios, we also have these different flow charts where you see, from what cluster does the hydrogen flow to the other, what is actually required now in terms of infrastructure to bring the hydrogen from outside of Europe in terms of import, terminal infrastructure, for example, a connection to the pipeline, and to transfer it further to the hinterland. I'm sure this is difficult for you to read on the slides, but I understand that these materials can also be shared. So I invite you to take a look in more depth. What I just shared with you was really a high-level macroeconomic overview, but there's much more than that. Our dashboards that we have provided, or the data at least that is also available, is actually available on a much more granular level. Such that, for example, ports or individual areas and regions can look at what is expected in my region in terms of the hydrogen demand, the expectations in terms of supply, and also the investments that are linked to that, the investments into the various infrastructures to produce hydrogen, renewable capacity, electrolysis capacity, import terminal, cracking, etc., etc. So all of that is then provided, such that also from a cluster on a port level, you can see, where is it from an economical perspective, the most interesting to look into to provide myself with hydrogen. And then indeed some port level dashboards as well. So that wraps up my presentation. It was a brief overview. The report on this is much more extensive. For getting more insights into that, I invite you to our network event, which is taking place in our offices in Brussels on the 23rd of November. So that's, I highly invite you to get more insights and also to connect to the stakeholders that are really in our network. We had a quite successful event before summer in Rotterdam, and we hope to do it over again in Brussels. And that's actually here. So here's the QR code, but also these materials, and the link can be shared if you wish to attend. So thanks a lot. That's it for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Stan. Congratulations. Are there questions from the audience in the room? No, on Slido there is one. Asking you about the sources that have been used for the demand data, and will your modeling change or evolve, especially over time when the industry will go more into the detail, would have clearer plans on the future? So source and evolution.
Yeah. Thanks for the question indeed from the audience. So on the sources, so all of the data that we use is basically publicly available data. There is data on how do we expect volumes for certain industry and so on to evolve. For example, from the steel industry, or how do you expect transport to evolve? So these macro trends. So that's one thing. Then there is data on the various scenarios that we expect. So for each individual sector, so we had 4 main segments, but actually 14 subcategories. We have consultants, 5 to 8 to 10 different scenarios to make our analysis more robust. And these are all from existing studies and existing sources. And in terms of, let's say, the refinery locations, plants and so on, there also we consult either source from Eurostat or from European associations to really build up the data set. We have not used company-specific data, also to allow and to respect antitrust rules and so on. But that's really our basic data set, and that's also available in our study to consult which sources that we consulted. So indeed, on the second part of the question, I believe it's all a moving target as we experience actually in the study today. For example, I mentioned the Repower EU initiative. I would say that is one of the examples that we do and that we try to accommodate those changes, at least from also a policy perspective, to see, okay, what would that entail. But it's true, it's a moving world, and I believe it would definitely be worthwhile to keep these things updated going forward.
Thank you very much, Stan. Now we have 20 minutes left for a panel, for a debate that has one objective. Usually we do reviews about projects and ask them perhaps to modify or looking at them from different angles. Now it's your opportunity to do a review of the program, of the Clean Hydrogen JU. We have one main document which is called SRIA, Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda. It has four categories falling under transport: the heavy duty, waterborne, rail, and aeronautics application. So the purpose of this debate is the following. Are we missing applications? How could we speed up the deployment of the hydrogen technology in transport with this RIA that lasts for 7 years? I'm not alone in that exercise. Together with me is Professor de KEUKELEERE, Dirk, from the University of Leuven, right? And so we will co-moderate, and whenever you do have questions or would like to comment, please do not hesitate. So perhaps some opening question or metaphysical question. Let's imagine you have €1 billion, you won the lottery, and you would like to speed up the hydrogen in transport. How would you do this? How would you tackle it? The same way as the Clean Hydrogen JU is doing it? If you imagine a future where hydrogen is plentiful in transport, how did we reach that future? Another type of question. How do you see urban mobility in 10, 20 years from the perspective of a student, from the perspective of a retired person? Are there trends that will influence it? Shared mobility? Voilà, these are opening questions. Perhaps your view, Dirk, on it, on this.
Well, my view is what we have seen right now and in the discussion here is that we have considered all the different modes a little bit apart. And I think we should create a more integrated view on how we are going to develop further hydrogen and hydrogen in mobility, in the sense that I'm hearing the different projects telling the same problems. They are looking for hydrogen refueling stations that work in an optimal way and that have a capacity that can fulfill the demand and which is not yet there but have to evolve. So I think we have to look more into integration and to find out how we can build ecosystems, and some of the ecosystems like Paris is already somewhat there, but then we have to find out ways to link the other projects towards that, so that the ecosystem is growing and that technology can evolve together with that, not only at the level of the vehicles, but also at the level of the refueling station and the supply of hydrogen, of green hydrogen.
Thank you. In your views, are there other sectors in which there is a need to electrify that are not tackled by the joint undertaking?
To be electrified or to go to hydrogen?
To be indirectly electrified with hydrogen.
Well, I think most of them are handled. Of course, there are always specific segments like off-road technology where I think there is an added value for hydrogen, especially if you have to go to zero emission technology, and that can be large applications like in harbors, where you have a lot of material handling, which can benefit from using hydrogen.
Thank you. Perhaps Stijn, staying in the port and environment, we've heard in other sessions talk about hydrogen valleys or ecosystem. Would it make sense to have a hydrogen port-specific ecosystem?
Yeah, definitely, Lionel. I think the parallel is very easy to make. And indeed, to come up with an answer also a bit on your broader, let's say, strategic question on, okay, are we doing the right things? I believe by doing such a study, bringing the stakeholders together, the whole, or one of the things is the chicken and the egg problem, and that needs to be resolved. Well, by taking a leading role and saying, okay, these are the targets, it will be there, and so on. Take, for example, the Belgian TSO yesterday announcing a strategy 2030-30-30, where they expect, okay, by 2030, 30 terawatt hours will be, let's say, flowing through our system. So it gives confidence. And I think that such an ecosystem allows also to give confidence and to put really the framework that is required for all the players inside the ecosystem to act and to be able to go to the technology, to the hydrogen-based technologies. So definitely I see those pieces of the puzzles falling together as such.
Thank you. Perhaps a provocative question to buses and trucks. Oh yes, we have a question from the audience, please. Several questions from the audience. Sir?
Okay, yeah. Yanis Vercammen from Turquoise. We're a VC in London. The billion, it's not a question, it's an answer to your billion Can I do that now? Yeah? Answer
Yes.
to your $1 billion investment.
Mhm.
I think we would not do something different from what you're doing already in the program. We would take one of the concepts, which is basically fleets. It's obvious. And we would do it in trucks, because we already have a truck investment, H3 Systems in Glasgow. And we would just scale that. That's what we would use the $1 billion for, yeah? To build around fleets, because that gets out of the chicken and egg problem. Because you're fueling and you're building the fueling infrastructure at the same time as building the truck fleet.
Okay. Thank you. Another comment or question from the other side of the room?
Thank you. It was said before, but just for passenger car, I don't think that it's a story of a chicken and eggs. We just need refueling station on the road. If we do have that, you will have people who want to purchase hydrogen car, and people who have money who want to purchase big hydrogen cars, so with maybe expensive car, but they just need to have hydrogen on the road to be able to refuel the car. If you want to make a comparison, if you look at Tesla, it's a very expensive car, but it's a fun car. It's very funny. And people are able to pay a lot to have this kind of car, and they can plug it in their garage or in their home, because sometimes they've got big home with a lot of plug, and they can plug it in their home. And they can put money on the table to purchase this kind of car. If you do have hydrogen on the street, I'm sure that a lot of people will be able to pay to have hydrogen car, and just focus on how to put hydrogen on the streets to be able to be sure that you can refuel your car everywhere in Europe.
So the infrastructure. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Back to the provocative question for trucks and buses. Today in China there are thousands of hydrogen trucks, perhaps several tens of thousands of hydrogen buses on the road. Most of the cars deployed within the project are from either Japan or South Korea technology, it's a fact. Where has Europe still a technology competitive space to play?
First you or first me? Yeah, so what you see in China, it's one government, it's not 27. With buses, they have one vision, and they say it has to be zero emission. If we run into the barriers of batteries and we need charging facilities, we will do hydrogen. We produce them. We produce thousands of buses, so therefore there's a mass scale. Providing fueling stations there, providing a zero emission solution. For cars, also they are some more ambitions by producing them themselves. In Europe, we are far too many doing one conclusive thing. So it's not one government. They set one ambition and they go for that ambition. We have to shift between the 27 countries we are and see what we can do best. But I think on the quality, on the research and development, and the building capacity we have still advantages. But if we go only on pricing, the Chinese will go further than us.
Thank you.
And probably also, I think it's just now a question of scaling up. If we don't scale up at European level, we will stay small, and for sure we will be eaten by the others. So probably I think your 1 billion. We should put it to also push our own industry or help our own industry to scale up. In the end, it's what we see with all innovations. It's thanks to scaling up that you can make it competitive.
But the question is, what do we need to scale up? Because what I see now in the projects you have mentioned, there is a lot of non-European technology there. And there was even a statement that non-European technology is better performing than European technology. So when we are scaling up, just by the demonstration project and extending the demand in mobility, then we are not going to solve this technology issue.
No, that's correct, but I have to say what Sven was saying was in the beginning of the Revive project, where we only had some Canadian fuel cell suppliers, but now we also have European fuel cell suppliers. We got Proton Motors delivering fuel cells to the project, Power Cells delivering to the project, and you see also in the ZEFER buses, you see Michelin, so you see a lot of changes within the 2019 area going up to 2022 now, but in the beginning in 2015, 2016, 17, 18 it was Boillot, it was hydrogenics, and that's not at that time wasn't European, as stated European, came from Canada. So I think it's also, as you mentioned, it's the ecosystem, it's a complete supply chain. You have to start with the billion to spend it in the supply chain, to keep it here, and also to create it here by ourselves, not getting all from outside.
So we have to focus more on the supply chain.
What I noticed, at least in my projects during the 8 years, for example, for the buses, is also supply chain issues. You see it with the garbage trucks needing hoses from China not coming, or at least a ship blocking the Suez Canal, meaning some months of delays because parts were on net to complete the vehicles. So if we can build them ourselves here and get the components from here, the supply chain is very important to get things done.
Probably also we should say, like we have in the electrolyzers, we're thinking about gigawatt scale factories. We should do the same thing with fuel cells, where we really work for mass production of fuel cells, so that we can make this whole value chain competitive. And I've visited some regions where really people are, let's say the research industry are aligned on it, but this probably now I think it's what we really need is this industrialization. If we speak now, particularly for Revive, it's very let's say it's very basic construction. If you go to other if you see to some of the projects where we work on buses, you can never be those buses will always be expensive, and you will be out of the market. And it's for all those for all these new components I think we need really to make it on volume, even if perhaps you don't have the best technology. It's not necessarily always the best technology that is the technology that will be applied in the end.
I would like to put one other question. We are talking here as if Europe is unified in respect to production, to refueling stations. However, the refueling stations finish in Vienna, and after that we have 2,000 kilometers with no refueling station. And with REPowerEU, that will be changed. I want to ask how many people here are from this region, southeastern? To raise hand. You see the concentration. So I think that we have to start talking also for this part, which is ready to introduce hydrogen in transport. I want to mention that up to now there is not a single project in which country from this region is participating in demonstration project. And normally I'm not going to discuss why, there are objective reasons for this, but that is the fact which has to be changed. And I see a very good opportunity with the hydrogen valleys and with the policy that there should be hydrogen valley in most of the countries, with the call for small hydrogen valley, and every country in its hydrogen valley will have transport. That is for sure. And here we put the question, we have to build refueling stations on every 100 kilometers. In Germany, there are 60, 70, 100. In this region of 2,000 kilometers, there is no refueling station. So, how could we, with joint efforts, start solving this problem? Those countries are ready to produce transport hydrogen vehicles, to produce parts, spare parts, and to enter into the value chain. And maybe there should be more trust in them because they're ambitious and they have very good science in respect to hydrogen. So I'm talking towards the companies. Well, this part of Europe is also ready to produce. This part of Europe has sun, has wind, and has good conditions for producing green hydrogen. We have to import from other continents, but we have also to support the European production. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. One last comment from your side, Dirk? Yes, please, please.
So, again, Thomas Bachmann, but now I have to state my company from Honda. So, what I would like to see is within the process of the next, let's say, program iterations looking at the SRIA, I would like to be happy to readdress fuel cell also for passenger cars again. We are currently doing a kind of assumption that everything has been solved on the passenger car side. Fuel cell systems are great. We just transform them into the, let's say, heavy duty sector, but the innovative power still is also existing at the car manufacturers, at the passenger car manufacturers. And within the current program, except the building blocks, there is little attraction to reinitiate or re-promote the passenger car as such. Looking at 2035 with the ICE ban, rediscussing 2026 about potential e-fuels in internal combustion engines, we have potentially a decision to make. From 2035, all passenger cars are based on batteries. Is this what the European Commission actually wants? Also in terms of scaling up fuel cell system technology and advancements. So I would like to see this bubble which was indicated in the charts. Yes, there were the passenger cars. Yes, fleets are great because there was no uptake in the public because they anyway had no information about fuel cell cars. Now we focus on every other transport. But we should start again to address this.
Thank you. Point taken. Still project on fuel cell for cars. One last comment from your side, Dirk?
Well, I would like to comment on this because I think this is, again, a chicken and egg problem, perhaps, in the sense that if you're stimulating the market and there is a demand, then OEMs will also invest in their products. But yeah, then the point is, are we already at the stage in the development where you can say, okay, now the market can go to deployment? And I'm not sure about that. So I agree that perhaps we have to look into new developments, not to improve perhaps the technology as such, but to reduce the cost of the technology.
Yes, I agree. What I wanted to do is making the point of European car manufacturers. Yes, Honda is a Japanese one. We know what we should do. We know the markets to focus on and potentially proceed. But if, let's say, in the public, the image occurs that everything has been done for the passenger cars, there's no need to further develop, then this is wrong. We are talking about research and innovation. I'm not talking so much about demonstration, which would be fine. It's essential, but I'm really focusing on additional research. We have now new manufacturers of fuel cell systems.